Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker.
Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn.
All right, Mr. DeMille, I'm ready for my close-up.
Dodge this.
Nathaniel, we are on our last episode of season 3. We've done this for 3 seasons. How does that make you feel?
It makes me feel old. Being a 3-year-old is, a hard time. I think you have all your teeth by then. I don't know a lot about children, but I do know I've enjoyed this experience of the past year of doing the Holy Moment podcast.
I mean, hey, at least we're past our terrible 2s. Although I have heard anecdotally that 3 is actually a worse year as far as chaos goes. But that just means that we have things to look forward to. Right? Let's embrace the chaos coming into 2026.
Does that mean season 14, when we're going through puberty, just has to be like a lot of sexual pent-up movies? What's like a movie a 14-year-old would choose?
A movie a 14-year-old would choose. Okay, this might get me in your bad graces, but the Michael Bay Transformer movies.
No, that's a great. Oh yeah, Fast and Furious. That's a great answer. I love the Michael Bay Transformers movies, but they very much deserve to be watched by 14-year-olds. The Minecraft movie.
Oh no, I don't want my 14-year-old seeing the Minecraft movie. And I mean, they can have fun with it, sure, but I don't want them to think it's good.
But I've really enjoyed. We've been doing this for a little more than a year. We're 3 seasons in, and it's been really fun. It's definitely forced me as a filmmaker to consume more movies that I never would have watched, and definitely analyze and pick them apart in a way that's made me a better filmmaker. Understand the movement of the camera, the language of the actors, and writing better. So I've really enjoyed it for that reason. And for those listening along, I hope you guys have gotten something out of it as well. I assume if you listen, you like movies, so I hope you guys have learned something about them.
Yeah, I mean, the movement of the cameras, the style of the actors, the writing. I feel like this is a good movie to dive into for all those things, but more of the first 2 things in particular. And we can discuss our praises and our gripes in just a second. But first, welcome to the Holy Moment podcast, where we watch movies with you and discuss the moments that work, the moments that don't, and the moments that reflect truth in unexpected ways. Every time I do that intro, I nearly forget it, like midway through, and I sort of just stumble through to the end.
I mean, your forgetful face makes you look like you're very deliberate. You're really thinking. It's deep.
That's good. I'm glad that you caught a forgetful face, though.
No, yeah, you did a great job. It's fun. It's becoming like a what do voice actors call it? Or just actors in general, like a trigger line. Like you say it, and like we say that line, it gets me like, okay, I'm ready to do the podcast. Mentally, I'm there.
Yeah, I mean, how I always view it is the script, right, is both the cage and the key. In that when you're first handed the script, you don't know it at all. You're constantly referring back to it. You're trapped by it. But the more time you spend in that cage, the more time you spend with that script, the more comfortable you become. And then it sets you free to act with more freedom.
So all I'm hearing, Jeffrey, is you have not spent enough time in the cage of our intro for the Holy Moment podcast, and you are still trapped like an animal. Maybe in season 4, you'll let yourself out.
Season 4, that's the hope. That's my New Year's resolution. Remember our slogan.
You came up with it. You came up with it.
Yeah, no, that's right. Yeah, it was a collaborative effort. We workshopped it. But anyhow, enough reflecting, enough reminiscing, enough planning for the future. Let's discuss YOJIMBO.
I just want to pause and let the audience know, when I logged on to this Discord call, Jeffrey went, "Yo, Jimbo."
Yo, Jimbo.
I thought it was funny.
It wasn't funny. He was humoring me, and I appreciate him a lot for that. He's a great friend. Get yourself a friend like Nathaniel. Anyhow, we're discussing the movie YOJIMBO by Akira Kurosawa. It's about a lone wanderer who makes his way into a town that is beset by 2 rival gangs, and through his own machinations and playing both against each other, he comes out on top, and both gangs end up completely obliterated. Now, if that story sounds familiar, it's because we discussed it last episode on A Fistful of Dollars. See, the story behind that's fun. We discussed it a bit then. Sergio Leone watched YOJIMBO by Akira Kurosawa. He thought, that is an amazing story. We have to turn this into a Western. Took him a month to write it, right?
Wow,
And then
I did not know that.
Yeah, he pushed it out. like a baby, right? But he did it very fast. It was like, straight from the spot.
Well, imagine just like the more you concentrate, the faster you can cook a baby in you. Those people taking 9 months, no, no, no. If you really concentrate, a month, fully baked.
Give him some Adderall. But yeah, so Sergio Leone, he popped out that script in a month. They filmed it, and Akira Kurosawa, he saw it, sent him letters saying, hey, that's a really fine movie you have there. And I know it's a fine movie because it's mine. And he successfully sued Sergio Leone and the producers for 15% of the total revenue.
Wow. I'm curious if I want to know, did Sergio Leone, did he feel embarrassed? Did it didn't seem to bespeak him too much in like the film community because he went on to make more movies. I'm more in that trilogy, the Dollar trilogy. So like I'm just curious, like did he not care? Was he bitter? Was he like, no, I was not ripping you off? Or like, yeah, I'm curious how he as a person took that, like being sued.
Well, they took the steps to acquire permission, but then they just never followed through. And so I think that Sergio Leone had the attitude of ask for forgiveness, not permission. And what came out of it was an equally iconic movie.
And getting sued.
And getting sued out of 15% of the revenue.
But hey, we found out last week he made $20 million, so he still made money.
Yeah, good on them both, right? For getting that dough. But here's what I'll say. These movies, despite having the same skeleton, right? They present themselves in very different ways, and in ways that I wasn't quite expecting. I was worried that this would be sort of a boring double feature, given that it is the same story and that Sergio was successfully sued for copyright infringement. But each director has their own distinctive style and areas of focus that I am so excited to dive into today with you.
I'm really interested because it is one of our first kind of almost like double features. And it's a lot of fun being able to watch. I mean, last episode, what we talked about, just inspiration, how art inspires art and how, you steal and then you create and you evolve and you do something new. But in the span of like 3 or 4 days, I watched these back to back and just to see the inspiration. But again, because of the culture, how tonally and how stylistically they were different. And it's a lot of fun as a filmmaker to see that.
For sure. And, it occurs to me that this is probably what the jury did too, when they're deciding whether or not
they just had a double feature.
Saddled on their couch, munching on popcorn, watching a double feature. That must have been the funnest trial that they had ever been forced to work at.
I just imagine they're eating their popcorn, they get halfway through and they're like, oh, this shit's the same. You know that iconic meme from Quentin Tarantino and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood where Leonardo DiCaprio's like sitting in his pool float, he's like pointing aggressively.
Yeah.
I guess imagine like one of the jurors doing that, like, wait a minute. This is the same movie.
Yeah, this is a direct rip. Both fire, though.
Yeah.
That was my experience seeing it.
Yeah. I think we can come out of the gate saying, I'm happy that he stole the movie. I think these were both really good movies for very different reasons. And so I'm happy it doesn't feel like he necessarily it didn't feel like he took a bad movie and made a good movie, or he took a great movie and then made a bad movie. It felt like he took a great movie and made a similar movie, but different enough for like to be really enjoyable.
Yeah, it felt transformative, right? If that's the standard that we're going by, I know that that's what current copyright discussion is about. Is this plagiarism? Well, is it transformative, right? If it's transformative, then it's not plagiarism. And Akira Kurosawa with YOJIMBO, he was heavily inspired by a lot of the westerns of John Ford. He's the director that directed John Wayne, a lot of movies, but also the movie High Noon, which, as I understand it, I haven't seen it, has a similar-ish premise where we have this Lone Ranger stumbles into a town and there are two rival factions, right? There are the farmhands and then there are the bandits. And he comes in and saves the day. But the tweak that Akira Kurosawa made was, he walks into this town and both factions suck. There's not a good guy or a bad guy. They're all just kind of scummy. And the arbiter of justice, who is not squeaky clean himself, wreaks havoc on this town, essentially, because no one's good. No one's particularly good. And we see this both in YOJIMBO and in A Fistful of Dollars.
I remember, it didn't come up in last episode, but with my research for A Fistful of Dollars, Sergio Leone also cited and argued in defense of himself while getting sued. He cited a book and then a play, both that very much predated. I think the play was from like the 1800s and the book was from like the early 1900s. I do not remember the names of them, but he cited them both as like, hey, look, it's very clear that I took inspiration from these works and so did a Kurosawa. It's not just the inspiration I took from Yojimbo, it's other stuff. So yeah, it is cool that again, art is always transformative. And it reminds me, I'm excited. We're going to talk about Yojimbo, I swear. Did you watch the Clone Wars TV show?
I've watched some of it, but I know that a lot of people feel that it transforms the experience of seeing the prequels.
Yes, don't stone me, people. Not a big Star Wars fan. The Clone Wars series is phenomenal. I absolutely adore it. And the later, this is going to be really foggy, so bear with me if anyone remembers this. In the later seasons of the series, there's this episode, because it's a very anthology-esque, kind of one-off stories. And it's this episode where I don't know, Padme, someone winds up in like the boonies on some random planet. And they find out that it is these greedy pillagers that have taken over the farm. And the farm people need to uprise. And our main characters, whether they're clones or Jedis, are kind of like, we can't get involved. But then someone convinces them to. And so they train the farmers to stand on their own. And it reminded me of that movie that you said inspired Kurosawa, High Noon. And then also just Yojimbo and A Fistful of Dollars. So it's cool, again, seeing these things trickle down to things that we watch in the 21st century.
Yeah, I mean, all art is derivative, right? We do not have the capacity to create something from nothing, right? We are formed by our experiences and by the media that we consume and the interactions that we have with the people around us and our environment. You said last week that you incorporated something into your short film, Jaeger, which is coming out in theaters soon. No, it's not coming out in theaters, but it's going to come out, and it's a fantastic movie. But you didn't realize that one of the elements of that film that you were really pushing for took inspiration from A Fistful of Dollars in an oblique kind of way. You were inspired by another film that was inspired by A Fistful of Dollars, which was inspired by YOJIMBO. A lot of our influences, we're not even aware of them, and that's incredible to me.
Yeah, it's been another great experience of the podcast, watching older films and more obscure films and realizing like, whoa, this definitely inspired this film I love that was, done in 2025. So that's a ton of fun.
For sure. Yeah. And I love it seeing these two cultures in conversation with one another, right? Italian culture was in conversation with American Western cinema when Sergio Leone decided to make a Western out of Akira Kurosawa's story. And then Akira Kurosawa was in conversation also with American movies when he made Yojimbo and wore his Western influences on his sleeve with the dusty towns and the rival gangs and the geishas, which were saloon prostitutes, like, or their equivalent. And you've got the casket maker, all of these archetypes, and the Lone Ranger. It's incredible. But speaking of similarities and differences, I really want to talk about some of the performances in this movie, right? Having watched Fistful of Dollars a few days ago and then Yojimbo, I couldn't help but compare and contrast our Lone Ranger figures. So there's the man with no name, who's called Joe in A Fistful of Dollars. And then there's Sanjuro, which I love how he gets that name. I think he's called the stranger in the script, but he's called Sanjuro because he looks outside his window. He sees a mulberry farm. And when asked his name, says, "Oh, I am the 30-year-old mulberry bush," which translates to something or other Sanjuro. And I just think it's fun. It's playful. And that goes into some of the differences between the two characters. First, I want to hear your perspective. What are some of the similarities and differences that you noticed?
Oh man, between the two, honestly, I feel like I noticed more differences than I did similarities. Again, they're put in the exact same position. Wanderer coming into town, getting in the middle of this gang rival dispute, and they take it to their advantage. But how they went about it was very different. And I think the biggest difference was Sanjuro was playful, he was coy, he was having a good time with this interaction. And I'm not going to say that Joe wasn't. You could tell that Joe was amusing himself with what was going on between the Rojos and the Baxters. But I felt like he was a lot more invested. Right from the beginning, we have Marisol, the female, and he's trying to save her. And I just felt like Ramon, the big bad guy, really felt like his arch nemesis. They have the big final shoot down and they were butting heads the whole movie. It felt like a pot boiling, ready to explode at any moment. So he just felt like a lot more serious. While Sanjiro was a lot more fun, a lot more lighthearted. You had the scene where he first goes to the Seibe clan at first, and he agrees to help them versus the other clan. But then when he overhears them talking about how they're going to kill him after he, takes care of the clan, his response to that is he just sticks his tongue out at them. They can't see him, but that's his response to himself listening, like, nah, nah, nah. No, you're not going to do that.
The thing that I appreciate about that scene is he's sticking his tongue out, but he's doing it playfully towards the geisha that are observing him, right? He's entertaining them while he's hearing this very macabre plot that they've concocted, right? Okay, as soon as he is done fighting on our behalf, we're going to kill him and we're going to take all the money we gave, right? And the geisha are, dumbfounded by this. Like, how's he going to respond? He just smiles. He sticks his tongue out. Kind of cute. And yeah, as you said, he was very playful. Clint Eastwood, Joe, is an efficient machine, exacting retribution on these rival gangs. And his motives are very mysterious. He holds his cards very close to his chest. He's very inscrutable, as a machine would be. Whereas with Sanjiro, there's still a lot that we don't know about his motivations. Why is he doing this? But we also get the sense that he's kind of doing this for his own amusement. He is enjoying this. He's laughing, he's smiling, and he's just more expressive. There's a lot of physicality to his performance that Clint Eastwood doesn't have. So he's twitching his shoulders, right, to indicate that he is a man of action. He's just itching to fight. And then he's scratching his neck and his beard and his head, giving the sense that he's just restless and gruff and sort of grody. Those are acting choices that Toshiro Mifune came up with himself, right? He wasn't directed to do those things. And he's typically regarded as one of the greatest, if not the greatest Japanese actor to have ever lived.
Oh, really? I was curious. I looked him up afterwards and I saw he was in a lot of Kurosawa's film. He's the main character in, I believe, The Seven Samurai. So, I could tell, working with the most famous Japanese director, it makes sense if you're one of, if not the most famous and competent Japanese actors.
Toshiro Mifune said that Akira Kurosawa is the only director that was able to get a performance out of him that he was satisfied with. And Akira Kurosawa, in turn, said something along the lines of a lot of these movies couldn't have been what they were without Toshiro Mifune. So they worked pretty closely together for a long time.
It's always great when you find like an actor and director combo who love working with each other and can bring the best out of each other. Because I think a good director obviously should bring the best out of an actor. But I think a good actor challenges and brings good things out of a director. But something I want to talk about when it comes to these two characters. I don't think you need to look past the first scene. I think the first scene says it all and the differencing of these characters. With Yojimbo, we open up with Sanjiro, and he's just walking. He's just on a road walking, and he comes to a fork in the road. He looks left, he looks right. He picks up a stick and throws it in the sky, and whichever way it lands, he makes his way down that road. What a great use of last episode where we talked about Ramon and story introduction. When you introduce a character for the first time, what a great way to introduce this character. He's a badass. He has the samurai robes, the sword. He looks fit. He looks competent, but he's playful. He is frivolous. He doesn't care. He has an attitude of nothing matters. I'm just out here doing not only just because you have this certainness of like nothing matters because I can do whatever I want, but he also seems a little aimless. You have this whole idea in Japanese culture as a ronin. It's a samurai without a master. He has no one to tell him what to do. He has no direction in his life. So I bet his backstory is very fascinating. So he almost has this melancholy. Like he has this fun frivolousness, but also like this idea of a melancholy of like, I have no point, so I'm just going where the wind tells me to go. So a great way to introduce a character. But then Joe, on the other hand, with A Fistful of Dollars, we're introduced with him at the water well. He watches this dispute of the Rojos. They kidnap this woman. They're shooting at this child. They're beating up this man. Very bad things. And he just watches. He doesn't do anything. He is taking the information in. Like Jeffrey says, he's a cold, calculating machine. He doesn't do things just because he's a good person. And so I feel like right off the beginning, we get the difference in, again, Joe is hardened. He can be fun and lighthearted, but mostly he is after his goal. But then Yojimbo, our Ronin in this movie, much more lighthearted, much more just going with the flow. And I feel like that really permeates the whole story.
And I think it's also worth mentioning, too, that, Sanjiro, his character is stoic, right? And he does hold his cards close to his chest, but he's willing to let his cards peek through from time to time, right? In sort of a cheeky way. And what his humor does, right, is it makes those moments of extreme violence and anger all the more pronounced. Like we see him joking, making fun. We see him smiling at these doofuses running the town. All that humor abruptly like leaves him once he sees the child and the mother, right, and puts together what's happened here. And that's when the games sort of end for him. He's willing to put his life on the line for these people, for like this mother and child and husband, because now the stakes have risen for him. And I think that's a really cool thing. Yes, he's doing this for his amusement, but now there are people to protect, and now he's going to protect them. And then when he screams at them to leave, that anger is very visceral, and it makes us wonder all the more, like, why is he being so stingy in this moment? Like, we know that he wants to help them. Or where is his anger coming from? What is in his past that causes him to behave in such a manner? And for A Fistful of Dollars, when Joe is telling them to leave, he sort of like raises his voice at them, but the anger isn't quite as intense, right? There isn't as much physicality to it. And he does give a line of explanation when asked, like, why did you do this? And he said, well, it's because there was someone in my past that experienced something similar, right? And he sends them on their way. So Sanjuro is a more volatile figure, whereas Joe is more cold and calculating.
But in that volatileness, I feel like, and you kind of explained it, I feel like we get more out of his character. I feel like he says more, and like again, he has a lot of body language. But I also feel like in those moments of outrage, he physically has more lines, I think, than Joe in A Fistful of Dollars, because Joe barely talks, and it's not like Yandere is talking a lot, but I feel like he talks more, and with his mannerisms, I feel like I have a more clear picture of his backstory. Granted, it's all made up in my mind because I know there's a sequel actually to Yojimbo that I cannot remember the name off the top of my head, which we should watch sometime. And so I'm curious if they get into his backstory there. But I just feel like in this movie, I can get a glimpse of his backstory because to me, again, he's this character that probably had duty, had respect, but something happened to make him almost apathetic. But he still cares about justice. So when he sees justice isn't prevailing, he gets angry about it. And so I like that. I kind of knew where his character was coming from to some degree. Again, still very much in my own mind, but I think the director and the actors were laying that for us to pick up on.
Yeah, like for example, we never see Sanjuro steal from either rival gang, even though they're criminals. Whereas in Joe's case, he breaks into the warehouse and he's knocking on each barrel to find where they've hid the gold, and he takes the gold out and he pockets it. So Sanjuro definitely has the Bushido code that he is still somewhat tied to, and then Joe is a complete enigma. We don't really know what he stands for, who he is. We get snippets here and there, but it's less complete.
And then some things they just do a 1-for-1 rip, whereas like both Joe and Sanjuro over here, the people that hired him, say, well, once they kill the other clan, we'll turn on them and kill them. And then both of them kind of let them know, hey, I'm not okay with that, and I'm not going to take your money either. They give the money back, and then they leave and go join the other clan. Almost like that was like beat for beat. I think the only difference is Sanjuro actually lets them know, like, hey, I overheard you talking shit. I'm not going to mess with you guys. I'm gone. Joe is a little more calculated. He doesn't let them know that. He simply just says, hey, I think you overpaid me. I don't really feel like I earned this money. Here it is. But he also didn't want to be indebted to people he didn't trust. So again, just like a beat for beat remake, and in those moments, it did feel like the same movie.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's so fun though, because even in overhearing that conversation, in Joe's case, he takes it in and he feels more resentful. He feels more suspicious. He's like, okay, I've got to watch my step around these people. Sanjuro, again, he's sticking his tongue out. He's having a grand old time. It's like, oh, they're planning on betraying me? Cool. I'm not going to let that happen.
Both of them felt very competent and in control. But there was something about, I think this is the difference, a big difference in the movie. The villains, the two clans and YOJIMBO were doofuses. They're kind of bumbling idiots. The two rivaling gangs and the Fistful of Dollars, they were competent. Ramon was like this competent, wise, cunning, ruthless person. And so even though Joe was the same, very competent, very smart, it felt like he was going up the same foe. So like, they were going blow for blow. Even though he was competent, he was going against a competent villain. Yojimbo, you never got the feeling that Sandro was ever in danger because he felt like he was surrounded by idiots who didn't know how to use a sword, and at any moment he could kill all of them if he wanted to, which I thought brought a fun dynamic to it.
I think that the Ramon counterpart in Yojimbo in this movie isn't particularly wise or clever or insightful or dangerous on his own. But when he pulls out that gun, right? The first gun we've seen all movie, and this is about halfway through, that tips the scales and that puts him more on a level playing field with Sanjuro. But at the end of the day, Sanjuro proves himself to be the better man and the more capable man. So once they find out that he has freed the lady and sent them on their way, he's captured and beaten up, and his sword is stripped from him, right? And the goons that are watching him are saying, "Oh, like, shouldn't we tie him up?" The other says, "No, I mean, he's nothing without his sword." And then he proceeds to prove why he is definitely something without his sword and a force to be reckoned with. Fast forward to the very end of the movie, Unosuke has been killed, essentially, or he has been maimed. And his pistol is several feet away. And one of his dying requests is, "Hey, like, can you bring me my pistol? I feel naked without it. I need this to pass on." Just going to show this man, Unosuke, is nothing without his gun. Whereas Sanjuro without his weapon is still Sanjuro.
They did a good job of again, this is where the movies really differed, but not for I could say maybe for better or for worse. Maybe it's just a preference. But again, it's Sanjuro versus these incompetent people. And I feel like it really makes it more about Sanjuro's actions rather than him fighting against these big bad people. Where it was, in A Fistful of Dollars, it was very much Joe versus Ramon. They were going blow for blow. They were trying to outsmart each other. And then in the end, they were fighting like with guns. And it really felt like at any moment, Joe could be defeated by Ramon. But it never felt like Sandro was ever really in any danger. I guess maybe when he got kidnapped after they caught him, helping the woman and the child and the husband escape, and they're beating the crap out of him. Another kind of just one for one scene. But even then, he still felt like he knew how to get the upper hand and was smart.
Well, I think that they both knew how to get the upper hand. I think that there was a comparable amount of tension in both of those moments when they're like in the cellar being guarded by the goons. In Fistful of Dollars, that scene ends with more of a bang as that giant barrel tumbles into the guys guarding the gate, right? The door. I think that was a more fun way to go. But in Sanjuro's case, I think that I felt real danger in the feet above him trampling overhead and him nearly poking his head out at the wrong moment.
I felt like the final battle had more tension in A Fistful of Dollars. And I think it heavily has to do with the editing, which we talked about last episode in Extensive, how they edit quick edits and extreme close-ups. I think really added to the tension, where Kurosawa is the opposite. Wide shots, long holds, which again, in its own right, which I'm excited to talk about, beautiful, gorgeous storytelling. But I think Sergio Leone was able to get a more tension-filled movie, in my opinion, than Yojimbo.
Yeah, no, I agree with that ending scene. It's one of the things that I guess having a gun does, right? Because at any moment, anyone could die in the blink of an eye. Whereas with swords, there is a load up time, as it were. It takes time to slice and stab and dice. With a gun, it's just 3, 2, 1, bam. And that means that the pauses are all the more suspenseful in A Fistful of Dollars. And the moments of impact and action are all the more explosive.
Yeah, I guess just to wrap up this thought, I never felt Sandro's life was in danger. Even when the goon showed up with the gun and he waved it, he was so funny waving his little gun. No one else had a gun. It just, I never once, and again, I had seen Yojimbo before, so maybe it's because I already knew. But I even feel like even on the first watch through, I never felt like, oh no, Yojimbo might be shot by a gun. Or not Yojimbo, Sanjuro might be shot by a gun. But I never felt that. I never felt any tension or worry that he was going to get hurt or killed. But I definitely felt like Joe could have died at any point.
That's fair. That's a fair read of these films. Speaking of weapons, in Yojimbo, they're mostly using swords and melee weapons, with the one exception of Unosuke, who has the pistol. In A Fistful of Dollars, it's all guns, everyday guns, right? How does that impact the action? And I sort of made a statement before about how it makes the gunfights, right, the showdowns, more suspenseful, more explosive action, and then more tense pauses in between. But then I think that swords also provide a certain kind of action that we can't have with guns because guns are so quick.
It goes all the way back to the idea of, again, like these two movies that are so similar to each other, but the big thing that makes them so different is the genre, samurai versus a western. And it's so fun, even when you have like the same story, different locations, different vibes, different aesthetics, makes it very different and enjoyable watches on both fronts. But I want to say something before I dive too deep into this topic. Something that I loved that both movies did with its weapons. Sometimes it decided to have blood and violence, and sometimes it was like, what if we just shot and you like spun in the air? And what if I just sliced you and clearly there was no cut on the clothes, there was clearly no blood, and you kind of just spun in a circle and fell on the ground. I thought that was very funny.
No, no, I agreed. At the end where they're smoking the sake gang out of their home and they're killing them one by one, I had to like stop the movie for a second and go, are they beating them with clubs?
Yeah, yeah. And the best, I would say the best moment, because it shows in such contrast, is the very end, the scene we talked about, where it's just Sandro versus like the last 7 or 8 of the final gang. And it's the guy with the gun. He has the gun. He goes to shoot Sandro. Sandro throws the knife and it impales in his forearm. And we see it. We see the knife in his forearm. We see the flesh, the blood oozing out. And then Sandro runs up, slices him. No blood, no cut, no nothing. It's so obvious that like the blade doesn't go through him at all. And again, I assume that's kind of the accepted style for the time because of the maybe limitations with CGI and everyone. There's no CGI at that point, really, but the limitations of what they can do. It makes sense that they can, set up some squibs, some shots to slice someone and blood comes out. But maybe it's really hard when you have that really long going one take where you have to cut down multiple people. Maybe it's too expensive, too time consuming. But that's just the first thing. I thought it was really funny that both movies had that.
You got to pick your moments for impact. One moment that I thought was particularly cool was I think they're capturing Yoichiro, who's the son of one of the gang leaders, and the guy that's with him gets sliced against a wall, and his blood just spurts against it and drips down, and that was really cool. And I imagine it would have been very expensive to have every person, every death be just as cool.
Yeah, no, that was a great scene, and all the blood was really cool. But to dive into that question, the difference and how does it affect the movie, let alone just like, oh, one has swords, one has guns. I think you are correct. Just I'm not gonna beat it to death, but the idea of the tension you can get with a gun, because at any moment, someone could die. But I definitely liked the choreography. The one really, really good choreographed fight scene we got was when Sandro went in and killed the 6 bodyguards who were protecting the wife they'd kidnapped. He goes in and he kills them, and it's like this beautiful, long, wide shot, and he's slicing them down, and it's so well choreographed, and it looks really cool. That, in my opinion, was one of the only not well composed. Oh my goodness, every single shot in this movie was beautiful. But it was one of the only really cool choreographed fight scenes. So I think when we did get that cool close quartered sword to sword fighting samurai style, I really liked it more than the gun fighting. But I wish there was maybe more of it. But I had a lot of fun watching Sandro convince the clans to fight each other early on in the movie. And then when he dipped out and said, actually, just kidding, I'm not going to fight with you guys. You have these 2 groups of like 20 people. And they're running at each other, and then they retreat, and then they run at each other, and then they retreat because they're too scared. And so you just see all these people waving these katanas around, being complete doofuses, not able to like do anything with them. And so that was kind of funny because I'm not used to that portrayal of like people with katanas. I'm used to like the slick anime style.
I mean, and that's the thing about Yojimbo's depiction of these crime groups. They're all style, no substance. They have all the tattoos, right? They have all the weapons. And they're more than willing to show off to you and say, "Oh yeah, like I've been arrested 17 times. I am charged with every crime on the book." Right? But when push comes to shove, they don't actually want to risk their skins, right? Risk their hides. Whereas Sanjuro, he is a man that has seen battle. He is a man that knows violence. He is a man that is comfortable with violence. And so seeing these posers feign bravado is very, very amusing to him.
And I think just on a personal level, I'm always going to enjoy, not always, but I'll often enjoy sword choreography. over gun choreography, like gung fu with like the John Wick stuff. It's cool, but it's not usually up my alley. It can make it a little more impersonable because you're so far away. But the idea of fighting with swords can, I feel like, can also add tension in its own right. You know, while the gun can go off at any moment, the sword, you have to get in close. You have to edge, closer, closer, closer. And that's another story component. We see the gangs all the time slowly edging towards each other and then running away. When Sandro uses his sword, it's swift, it is with confidence, and he cuts you down fast. You don't even know what happened. You're dead. And so I love watching him fight because so much of the movie, he's just kind of a, not a bumbling idiot, but just like a loafer, just doing whatever he wants, chilling. But then when it's serious, he moves like lightning with precision.
And I mean, one of the things that makes a gun so impactful is also one of the things that makes it not as impactful in certain contexts, where, yeah, you point and you shoot, and now the guy is on the ground. But with a swordsman, you get to see the process of, okay, the sword is unsheathed, it's sliding across his chest upwards, and this is exactly how this man dies, right? There's no ambiguity. Did it hit the heart? Did it hit the liver? Did it hit the stomach? Nope. This sword sliced straight through the chest.
And I'm happy with both, that both our characters, Joe and Sandro, were competent killers. You know, Joe was a gunslinging man who was able to shoot 4 people in the span of a second, and Sandro was able to cut down 10 men who also had swords. And so it was a lot of fun. It would have been a lot less of a fun movie and enjoyable ride if they were not competent in what they did. But at no point did either of them waver, even when they were being tortured. They had a strong sense to them. Like, they've been through shit, they've seen shit, this isn't anything. Like, I love the end of the movie, at the end of Yojimbo. After everything that happened, he got tortured. His friend almost died. He kills all the bandits and looks at the tavern guy who's his friend and said, "Cool, bye," and just turns around and walks out of his life, and the movie ends. So you could tell, like, it just was another Tuesday for him. And I like that.
I feel like in A Fistful of Dollars, there was more of a push by the remaining townsfolk to keep Joe in the area. And Joe had to resist a little more. He's like, no, I've got business elsewhere. He's explaining himself more. Sanjo's like, no, I'm dipping. Now, Joe and Sanjuro, both very competent. Ramon and Inosuke, the same cannot be said of them, right? If you took Joe and Sanjuro, put them in a room together, had them fight, like no weapons involved, that would be a tussle. And I don't know who to win exactly. But if you put Unosuke in a room with Ramon, that's going to be brutal and not pretty to watch, because Unosuke will be creamed within seconds. Like, Unosuke, his whole thing is like, ah ha ha, look at me, I got a gun. Meanwhile, Ramon has his rifle. Even if you give Unosuke a gun, like a pistol, and you give Ramon a pistol, one has infinitely more experience with guns in general than the other.
I think the just the bad guys is where the story really differentiated. I feel like Yojimbo had more of a comedic effect. I feel like it was almost satire on these two groups, these two like fighting clans that were so dim-witted and inefficient with what they were doing. But then in A Fistful of Dollars, specifically the Rojos, they were so cunning, they were so conniving. And I just felt like that made A Fistful of Dollars have more of a storyline. Specifically Ramon and Joe's rivalry. They were kept butting heads, They felt like genuine foes. And so that just gave it more tension, and it gave it more of a climax. Where I feel like with Yojimbo, it wasn't necessarily about Sanjuro fighting these two clans because these clans were dumb. Like, sure, they one-upped him, but it was kind of unfair because he didn't have his sword in the moment. You know, if it was truly fighting, he never would have gone down. So I just felt like, to me, the end of Yojimbo was a little lackluster compared to A Fistful of Dollars. It felt like it meandered a little bit because we didn't have that rivalry. We didn't have that tension. It kind of felt like he just walked in, slayed everyone, and was like, okay, deuces, bye.
Well, here's what I'll say. I do appreciate that Yojimbo had both rival gangs have more of a part to play, right? In A Fistful of Dollars, it's just the Ramon show. But in Yojimbo, both the Sebas and the sake makers and the silk weavers, the silk merchants, are important to the town. And that's another thing, too. The stakes of these two rival factions being put down for good feels higher stakes for the village because we have a major business owner on one side and a major business owner on the other, right? And people are likely going to lose jobs if these businesses are destroyed. And at the end of the movie, the silk warehouse is burned down and all the sake is emptied from the barrels. Whereas in A Fistful of Dollars, you just got two rival gangs. There's really not much else to it. Like, what are they providing to the community? Save for maybe protection from outside forces, but the townsfolk need protection from them.
The vibe of the villains within the town created a different atmosphere within the movie that I appreciated. That again, I'm happy that Fistful of Dollars went with a different route. Otherwise, again, it would have felt too similar.
Which town do you feel was more devastated by the destruction of the rival factions? Because I think that A Fistful of Dollars, that town felt emptier at the end of the movie.
I think that town felt emptier at the beginning of the movie as well. I feel like the Fistful of Dollars town had to be more devastated, but it felt like no one was in it from beginning to end. And I will say, I felt similar about YOJIMBO. Because that was an annoyance I had with the Fistful of Dollars. Like, is there no one in this town because we're saving money on extras? Like, what's going on? Like, I want to see the local like grocery store owner. I want to see the children, everyone being harassed. But like, we just had like 2 or 3 main characters in the town and no one else. But YOJIMBO was only a little bit better. There was a handful more like background characters, but it was mostly just like the tavern owner, the coffin maker, and that's kind of like it. Like, I guess it had the 2 mayors. It had the silk weave owner mayor, and then it had the sake mayor owner. But I will say that one scene helped. Middle of the movie, when the 2 clansmen are about to fight, but they're being too much pussies, someone comes in and is like, stop the fighting. A council member is going to come and like inspect us. And so the 2 gang leaders had to be like, oh no, we can't fight anymore. Go quick, tell everyone to open up their homes to make it look like we're not like in war. And so all the gang members are banging on doors like, open up, open up. And that one scene alone helped me feel like that town had more people in it. And so I guess for that reason, it felt like maybe YOJIMBO's town was more destroyed because there was more people in it, like more livelihoods on the rope hanging in the balance.
I think too also at the beginning of YOJIMBO, we see the mother and father trying to convince the son not to run off and join a gang. At the end of the movie, that same young man is spared by YOJIMBO, right? He's pleading for his life, and YOJIMBO tells him, go home, don't join gangs, you got a lot of life to live.
Yeah, and I'm really happy you brought up that scene because I put it in my notes to talk about it and I would have forgotten. Do you know what that scene inspired? Like when they did it, I was like, whoa, this is like a 1-for-1 moment.
What did it inspire?
Kill Bill. Have you seen Kill Bill? Yeah, we watched it together.
Yeah, we watched together. It was a while ago. I can't recall it all that much, but
there's a scene where the lady in Kill Bill, who I also I don't think she has a name like these characters. So again, the references, where she fights a whole cavalcade of samurai ninja people, like they're called the Crazy 88. So 88 swordsmen, and she kills like all of them. But there's one final guy who's standing there, shaking, shivering. And she pulls him over her knee and slaps him with the back of her, like the blunt end of her sword, and say, go home. Your mom's probably worried about you. You're a child. Like almost like the exact same line. So when I saw that, I was like, oh, heck yeah. Again, inspiration. It's just stealing and evolving.
Quentin Tarantino, his inspirations were samurai movies and Westerns, right? At least that's what it seems like whenever you hear him talk about film. And he talks about stealing from everything, but everything just so happens to be samurai films and Western films for him.
And I mean, hey, great things to steal from. Those are some really good genres to take from. But something I want to talk about, we've been talking a lot about it in the past like 3 or 4 episodes of the podcast. And it's because we've been kind of feeling like these movies haven't been doing a great job with it in past with Dear Lemon Lima and The Kings of Summer, and even a tiny bit in There Will Be Blood. But setups and payoffs, I think A Fistful of Dollars does infinitely better with its setups and payoffs than YOJIMBO does, personally. Like, there are some setups and payoffs, but I'm talking about big, grand scale things. The 2 I can think of, the woman and the Union coming in and Rojo's gangs betraying them, killing them all, and taking their weapons. What I mean is, Marcelone, or whatever the woman's name is, she is like a character plot point through and through. We open up with the movie seeing her and being mistreated, being kidnapped, and then Joe helping her escape is what leads to the climax of him being betrayed and captured and beaten and almost killed. So it has that setup and that payoff. In YOJIMBO, they do something similar where there's a woman that is kidnapped and she has a son and a husband, but there's not really a setup for it. It just kind of feels like something that happens in the middle of the movie that Sandro helps her escape and leave. And it was really cool. And I like the action more in it, but the setup of it wasn't there. So therefore the payoff wasn't really there.
That was our first time seeing those characters. We hear a lot more expository dialogue in Yojimbo versus Fistful of Dollars. We're shown more in Fistful and then told more in Yojimbo.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And then the second instance in Yojimbo, when all the clans were about to fight, and then someone calls, like, there's a council member coming. We have to stop the fight. And the council member or whoever he was, a sheriff, an inspector, whatever he was doing, comes in. The gangs play nice. They're like, oh, we're going to play nice. And then they kill someone in a faraway town, so he'll leave. He didn't really do anything. He kind of was pointless, I guess, besides stopping that fight. But at that point, he just feels like a plot device. In A Fistful of Dollars, you have this looming idea that the Union soldiers are going to come. They keep saying, we gotta keep peace. The Union soldiers are coming. They're coming. And then they show up. And they use this as the introduction to Ramon, where he betrays the Mexican soldiers and he shoots them all down and kills them and, takes their gold. And that feels like a better setup and payoff. And it sets up a character where this inspector just kind of plot device happens to come along to stop this fight. So it's things like that I felt like streamlined and made A Fistful of Dollars a more enjoyable watch because it followed a more traditional story arc and story structure with our setups, our payoffs, our rising action, our tension, and our climax, and then our resolution. Where Yojimbo shined, it shined in its mise en scène. And that's French for everything within the frame. The movement, the cinematography, the acting, the dialogue. It was a much fuller movie. A Fistful of Dollars felt like it took Yojimbo and stripped it to the bare bones, but it did the bare bones better. But Yojimbo felt like it had a much better atmosphere, much more full. What would you agree with that?
I think I would agree that Fistful of Dollars filled in some story gaps that Yojimbo had or showed what Yojimbo had told. And I mean, that's the essence of film. But Yojimbo, as you were saying, what it showed us, everything that it put in the frame, far exceeded anything that we saw in the frame in Fistful of Dollars, at least in my opinion.
I definitely agree, and I might even be getting into my the holy moment territory. But that was something that I just found fascinating. How because we talk about art inspiring, and you take an idea and you evolve it, but it was almost like A Fistful of Dollars concentrated the idea. It took the story and concentrated and streamlined it into a more structured story. At a loss, it lost the mise en scène. It lost the fullness of the atmosphere of Yojimbo, but it gained, I think, a more streamlined story. So it's just usually the opposite where you evolve and make things more complicated, but A Fistful of Dollars not diluted, but concentrated it.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense to me. Here's what I'll say, setup and payoff. I just want to talk about a tiny moment in Yojimbo that I think did setup and payoffs like very well. When Sanjuro saves the lady and reunites her with the husband and the child, tells them to leave. And then he enters the house where they were kept and he wrecks it. And he spends a good bit of time doing that. Then he comes back out, right? He's huffing, he's heaving. He sees them there and they're bowing towards him. They're very grateful to him. And this really pisses him off. He's not used to being appreciated, I guess. And he tells them to run. And sure enough, they flee. Well, later, apparently, they stopped by the inn and gave him a little letter, right, of gratitude. And of course, he doesn't want it because it implicates him. And sure enough, in walks Unosuke. And they're already suspicious. This is a very tiny instance of setup and payoff, but the letter is on the table. Inosuke hasn't noticed it yet. They're talking over it. Sanjuro very slyly twists a sake bottle on top so that it's hidden. And then, of course, the innkeeper comes and moves it. It's very small setup and payoff, but I love that scene. I love that moment from Sanjuro. I thought it was very cool, just how casually he hid the letter. But it was all for naught. It was all for naught. I guess the innkeeper was trying to take the letter with it. But at that point, I think it would have been better if they just kept the sake on the note.
It's a good scene of setup and payoffs. It's also a good scene of tension. Because like we discussed in Psycho, Alfred Hitchcock's idea of it's one thing for a room to all of a sudden explode. It's another thing to know there's a bomb and we watch and wait. When is it going to explode? Who's going to get caught in the shrapnel? To know that letter is there when the two thugs come in, it's like, Is he going to see it right away? Is he going to read it? Are they going to hide it? Is he going to miss it? Is he going to miss it and then come back and then see it? And so it adds that tension of any moment that bomb, in air quotation, is going to go off. And so that was a good use, I think, of setup payoffs and tension building.
And I think that that's how you make tension is with setups and payoffs, right? You set up that the letter is on the table, that Onosuke has entered the building and has not noticed it yet. And as we see the different ways in which we're trying to hide this note, right? That's building upon what we've previously set up. And then the payoff is whatever becomes of this moment.
I'll really remember that next time I go to commit my like act of terrorism. I'll be like, tension, bombs, this whole setup and payoff. I'm setting up the bomb. I can't wait to see the payoff of the bomb. It'll be great.
Exactly. I mean, think the famous Dark Knight scene, right? Where the Joker is walking away from the hospital and he presses the button. And that's the setup. The hospital hasn't exploded yet. And so he's angrily pressing the button again and again. Poof. Payoff. It's all the more satisfying because of that moment of pause, that tension, and the build.
That's a good reference. We should start keeping track and giving ourselves points, and Sue has the most points of how many times we can reference a film theory concept or a film to another film in an intellectual way.
That'd be fun.
Yeah. Really make sure we know who the better filmmaker is. Kidding. Let's not do that. It won't be me.
Well, anyway, we've talked about setups and payoffs. We've talked about creating tension in a scene, and we talked about the shot composition. Like, what is your favorite shot composition in this movie? Because one of my favorites would be Sanjuro atop the bell tower, right? As the armies are fighting. It's showing that he is above the petty squabbling. Like, he is seeing it from a bird's eye view, and like he knows better. He sees it for what it is. Whereas they're in the thick of it and they don't.
I mean, that was going to be mine. It's a beautiful, you got so much going on with the shot composition. I love how he starts higher and you don't really see anything. It's such a huge wide shot. It's just him up in like a speck in the sky. But then on the left of frame, you slowly have swords enter in. And then on the right of frame, you slowly have swords enter in. But on the right of frame, they're entering really close. So in film terms, you have the foreground, the midground, and the background. The foreground is the closest to the screen, the midground's in the middle, and the background is in the background. Makes sense. So these swords enter on the right side, they enter in the foreground, so really close to camera. The gang in the middle, swords enter in the midground. And then you have Sandro in the background and the way back. So, I mean, you're getting into my holy moment, so I might as well just say it right now. Akira Kurosawa has mastered movement in his cinematography. You know, we can talk about shot composition all we want, and he does an amazing with that. But what makes a Kurosawa movie is the movement. I love how he always has rain. He always has smoke. He always has these large groups of people sitting and standing and moving and rotating. And then it just elevates the scene so much. And on top of that, then his shot composition, he has mastered the foreground, the midground, and the background. One of my favorite shots is when we reveal his tavern friend who is being hung up, humiliated in town square, and he is very much in the foreground. And then in the midground, we have the bad guys, we have the clans members, and they're approaching on Sandro. And in the very back, in the background, you have Sandro being revealed as the smoke blows away. And so you have all of these concepts, the foreground, the midground, the background, movement, weather, and it all comes together for such a visually interesting shot. I loved watching. Every single shot was so filled to the brim, so much movement, so much life. And also, his shots just make sense. You know, it's not always often that you're watching a shot and you think this is really boring. I think subconsciously you think it's boring, but you don't think mentally it's boring. When you watch a Kurosawa film and you see the shot, you immediately think that was so smart. It was so simple. He just put a dude hanging in the foreground, he put some people walking in the midground, and he put a dude way in the background. But he takes the time to think about it. He takes the time to composition his film, his people, and it makes the movie so much better. Another shot I love is you have Sandro and the tavern owner standing, and they're in the foreground. And then the midground, you have a wall with like slate, like a window where you can see through these slates. And in the background, you have some of the clansmen drinking in another building through the window. And so it's just the intentionality he does that makes it amazing. And I love that you just watch it and you go, why didn't I think of that? It's not $1 billion. He just put people and objects in the right order.
You know, it makes me wonder, what this movie would have looked like if it were in color, and if that would have honestly detracted. Because when you're in black and white, right, everything's about light and shadow and value. And then color is a whole other beast you have to consider in a shot composition. And so like if we had seen those shots in color, but what's a good example? You take a picture of a forest, right? I went to a park recently and I was testing out my new camera, and I've never been particularly techy or good with cameras. And so I was just getting some practice in. It's a beautiful park, right? Absolutely gorgeous. I take these pictures and I look at them and everything just looks like a green blob. I wonder how color would have affected this. And I wonder if something was lost with the introduction of color. I mean, I'm sure something was, but something was also gained. But I want to hear your thoughts on that.
I mean, you hit the nail on the head. It's contrast. Even when we introduce color, it's still contrast. So the idea, I mean, when it comes to composition and cinematography, there's a million things that go into it, but we're specifically talking about color. Let's go to the example of you in the forest. If you went to the forest, green pine trees, green grass, but then a singular, small, budding red mushroom, and you took that photo, the mushroom would have popped because of the contrast against the green. It's the same thing. That's what old black and white is. It's contrast. It's the greatest value of black is black, so the greatest value of white is white. It's contrast. So when you take the color out, I think it is easier for our eyes to pick up on depth and pick up on that composition because there's less distracting, but there's also just so much more for the canvas to punch out from the black and whites, not all the other colors. So I mean, again, that contrast, white and black. If you go into a forest and you have only green and then a red mushroom, you can have great contrast. I am not arguing that I think white and black films are better than colored. I think arguably we gained way more with color than we lost with color. But I do think we did lose something. I think we lost this ability to be solely focused on certain things by not having the distraction of so much color. And also, since you only have two colors to work with, I think it makes you be more intentional with your choices, with your shot composition, with using shadows and highlights to highlight, no pun intended, what our subject is looking at. I think a great example of this, another amazing shot, is kind of nearing the climax of the movie when the gang, the three brothers, the one with the gun, they get pissed off because they think the other gang is hiding Sanjiro. So they go light fire to the silk owner, the silk merchant, because he's the patron of the other gang leader. So they set fire to it. And we get this close up, medium, pretty close up, pretty tight on the thug's face who owns the gun. And he's jeering. What a great word. He's jeering, smiling, scowling. And then all of a sudden a window explodes in the background and flames immolate up into the sky. And that fire, is red, but you can't see it being red. It's black and white. But again, the contrast that plays with the light now in his face that wasn't there before really makes him pop. And so again, I think we lost the intentionality that we now gained because now every color is at our fingertips, which is great. But I do think there is a difference in why black and white is kind of timeless.
Yeah, there's definitely more to consider with color for sure. And it makes me really want to watch Akira Kurosawa's color films because he does have some. We get some pretty famous shots, pretty colorful shots too.
And there's something, just to wrap up that thought, there is something just about black and white that I'm sure could be put into words, but also there's just something subconscious about it. And the reason I say that, because I was watching kind of like a real AMV of all of Kurosawa's work, just the cinematography, beautiful shots after beautiful shots. And all the ones in black and white stood out to me more than the ones in color. And I think it's because, again, these are flash. You're getting like 1 or 2 seconds of these scenes, but the black and white makes it stand out to the eye so much more than even a beautiful composition shot with color. So I think that is true. I think just the immediate punch reaction of our eyes taking in the white and blacks and the contrast of it is very appealing to our brains, and it stands out with such a style.
Well, we should make a black and white short film soon. I think that'd be fun. Well, guys, Nathaniel shared his holy moment. My battery is low on my wireless wireless headphones. So I guess I'm going to share my holy moment with you all. My holy moment would have to be, honestly, the performance of Toshiro Mifune. I loved the physicality that he brought to this role. I think Clint Eastwood did very well as the man with no name, right? but it was different. It was different, right? His acting was behind the eyes, but the character choices that Mifune made to bring Sanjuro to life, and he was a living figure. It's so impressive to me as an actor, right? The twitching of the shoulders to indicate that he's a man of action. He just needs to be doing something. And the scratching of the beard and the neck and the head to show that he's gruff, a little grody. That really stood out to me. And again, the playfulness of sticking the tongue out at the geisha, right? Those were all his choices, not Akira Kurosawa's. That was what he brought to the table. And so I would say that that is my holy moment. With that being said, what are you going to give this, Nathaniel? We talked a bit before filming, and you're telling me that you appreciated A Fistful of Dollars more than YOJIMBO. After this conversation, would you say that you're still in the same boat?
It's hard. And actually, I think I appreciated Yojimbo more than A Fistful of Dollars. I think I was more entertained by A Fistful of Dollars. I enjoyed watching A Fistful of Dollars more. And it goes back to the point of it concentrated the story. I love beautiful cinematography. I love really full screens and a lot of information that's going on. But at the end of the day, I will always be a character story driven person. And to me, while there's way more complexity, way more subtext in a Kurosawa's Yojimbo, without a doubt, hands down, I feel like the story got muddled to me. I can't remember if I said this in the podcast or if I was telling Jeff before the call, but to me, when we got to the end of the climax, the end of the movie, and Sandro is there, or he's even before the climax, leading up to the climax, when he's about to fight the final gang members, I just wasn't invested because these gang members didn't feel like a threat. Sandro just felt like he was kind of traipsing around the whole movie, doing what he wanted to do. So I never felt like any tension, any rising climax. And so when we got to the end of Yojimbo, I just didn't get a payoff. And then on the opposite with A Fistful of Dollars, well, I think it was much more bare bones, not as complex as characters, not nearly as good as cinematography, and not as good as storytelling in some components. But the storytelling was more straightforward. And so I could get the rising action, I could get the setups, I could get the payoffs. And for those reasons, I enjoyed it more. But Yojimbo was far more impressive of a movie. So I really feel bad. Like the filmmaker in me, the film lover, wants to give Yojimbo a higher score. But can I give it a higher score of a movie that I didn't enjoy as much as A Fistful of Dollars? And I'm going to answer that question right now. I am. I'm going to give Yojimbo. Man, am I just kissing the ass of good filmmakers, or do I actually feel like it's one of the first times I really feel confronted by a score? Because usually I can trust my gut reaction. You know, all filmmakers score things or like things for different reasons. I trust my instincts. I usually can take my instincts and say my instincts are a combination of knowing good art, knowing good cinematography, knowing good acting, knowing a good story. And so I trust kind of the gut reaction I give. But with this, I didn't love the story, but I loved the execution. And so for that reason, one of the first times ever on the podcast, I'm not just going to give it a gut reaction. I'm going to give it a 4 for what I think it was able to do in the mise-en-scènes, in the fullness of the characters. But I do think I enjoyed A Fistful of Dollars, which I only gave it 3.5 more.
You know, that's very interesting because, like, some might say that the difference between the two stories is mostly in execution, given that it has like a very similar bare bones structure. But yeah, no, I think that tracks to me. I think I not only appreciated Yojimbo more, I think I enjoyed Yojimbo more. And a part of it was I really enjoyed following Sanjuro specifically as a protagonist. And I really enjoyed following Clint Eastwood too. But Sanjuro brought something, I think, as an actor, that resonated with me more than Clint Eastwood's performance. I had more fun like analyzing his performance through the lens of a fellow performer. So I'll give it a 4 as well.
Yeah, I mean that's very fair.
All right. Well, everybody, thank you for joining us for the last episode of season 3. Not forever. It's just of season 3. Don't y'all worry. We're going to be here next year in 2026. But in the meantime, we're going to need your suggestions for categories, right? You can email us those suggestions at theholymomentpodcast@gmail.com. I'm also going to post a story on Instagram, fishing for suggestions. And I'll also list some of our past categories, give you a sense for what kinds of categories we're looking for. But like, engage with us. We want to engage with you. And this is how.
I'm excited to be 4 years old. I'm excited to grow into a older toddler, a more mature. I feel like we're entering into our more starting to get more mature as podcasters as a 4 year old. So I'm excited for the new year and to get into season four and pick out some good picks. I've also, now that we've done the podcast for a while, I'm getting a good idea of what, even if this movie, I think I would enjoy it, not every movie makes for good podcast material. So I'm excited as I feel like I get a better idea of what makes for good podcast material and watching.
I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on that soon.
Yeah, maybe we'll dive into that. But yeah. Stick around with us, guys. Hopefully, in season four, we're gonna try and do some more things. We want to start streaming. We want to start doing like some tier lists of the movies we've watched in the past, and just more content for you guys. And again, not just content to put it out there, but we want to make a film community. If you love movies because you grew up with them, or because you're discovering new movies now, whether you grew up in Russia and you're discovering like Western film for the first time, or vice versa, commune with us. We love movies, all types of movies. We are not the most well versed in film. We went to film school. We're trying to become better artists, but we want to talk and hear from you guys.
All right, guys. We will see you. Find us on YouTube, Spotify, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, all those beautiful places. We'll see you next year, and stay holy.
That's the last thing they're going to hear, Jeffrey. That's what you want them to hear you as?
Maybe. I mean, we'll workshop it. We'll workshop a better ending. But until then, stay holy.